All right, well, tonight we're going to do something radically different from what we would normally do. Um, I have a good friend of mine. In fact, a lot of his research has helped me in the last now 5 weeks, fixing to be 6 weeks, in our sermons that we've been doing on Sunday mornings, looking at end times. And his name is Damon Duck, and he is a end times scholar. And he's just a friend of mine that I met at my previous church. And one of the things that I got to be a part of was he would study world news and current events and then come and do a presentation and show us how these current events are not necessarily bringing about the end times, not necessarily saying that we're in the end times, but it definitely makes us open our eyes to say, hey, things are progressing towards the return of Christ. And so he would do this. He would do it actually every single Saturday, and I didn't get to go to any of those, but about every other month, he would give a presentation to some pastors that I got to be a part of. And so I'm kind of taking what he instilled in me and how he taught me, and we're going to do that tonight. And so, again, this is not to say, hey, we're now in the tribulation, because if you've been coming to my sermons, then you know I believe in a pre-tribulation rapture, so the rapture will occur. This is not to scare you to think, oh no, it's going to happen tonight. I pray that it would, but it doesn't mean it will. These are just to get you to think, get you to say, hey, God is lining things up. He has since the very beginning. And we can go back. In fact, tonight we will look back at the birth of Christ, and how since the birth of Christ He has been lining things up for the return of Christ. And so we're going to look at that. So since we have been doing the sermon series on the end times, we looked at the first one wasn't even part of the series. It was looking at where the church is right now and how we are at the state that we're in because of sin. We've fallen away from God, and we are just continually getting farther and farther away from God. We see that happen every day. Then we moved into the rapture of the church, how the church will be taken out. So if you're a believer in Christ, you will be gone. But then the next sermon was on the 7 years of great tribulation and the things that will take place. The first aspect of the great tribulation are the 7 seal judgments. And we're going to look at some of those tonight. And let's see, if we begin with the rider on a white horse. And that will be the introduction to the Antichrist and how that applies into tonight's lesson. And what will happen during the Antichrist reign will be the religious persecution. And so we read about that in Revelation chapter 6, verse 2. It says, "Now I saw when the Lamb opened one of the seals, and I heard one of the 4 living creatures say with a loud voice, like thunder, 'Come and see.' And I looked, and behold, a white horse. He who sat on it had a bow, and a crown was given to him, and he went out conquering and to conquer." Well, looking at some of the current events that are going on in the world today, one of the things is that this has been going on for a while, not just in Canada, but even in the United States, but drive-in church services have been blocked. After being fined $5,000 for holding an in-person worship service, a Canadian church was prevented by the police from holding a drive-in worship service. I do have every one of these things I'm going to share with you tonight. I have the website. This came from the ChristianPost.com. And so I have the link. If you have any questions or you want to do any more research or follow-up, I'll be glad to send you the links to all these news articles. And you can see if there's an actual, if it's just specific or if this is nationwide in Canada. Anybody like Twitter? I got rid of my Twitter. Actually, I didn't get rid of the account. I just got rid of the app, and I haven't been on it in a while. But if you know anything about Twitter, you know that they're all about silencing and saying who can say what. Well, now we see their hypocrisy. They don't allow Christians and anything that's conservative or Jesus-based that they are now allowing pro-Marxists to burn priests alive using the hashtag to make it go. Let me start over here. Twitter's allowing a tweet with a hashtag saying that they should go out, that people should go out and burn priests basically at the stake in Spain. And so they are doing this. This hashtag is calling for Catholic priests to be burned alive, which was started by several pro-Marxist accounts. And while they may remove conservative things or Christian things, this has not been removed by Twitter despite numerous complaints. The city of Los Angeles has been on has issued a 21-day lockdown. Again, going back to churches, they won't allow churches to get together and meet because they are saying that you have to be, everybody as a mandatory quarantine for 21 days. There are the martyred Christians. There are suspected terrorists who have killed 4 Christians and burned church members' homes after attacking a Salvation Army service post. Police in the Muslim majority place in Indonesia were searching for suspected terrorists Saturday after the throats of 3 Christians were slit. Another was beheaded, and a Salvation Army post and some Christian homes were burned down on the island of Sulawesi. I guess that's how you might pronounce that. Now, some good news. If you've been keeping up with this, just last week, the Supreme Court blocks the New York COVID-19 response, and they're limiting church services and their worship. Well, the Supreme Court said that was not constitutional, and they said that churches could get together and have worship service. So basically, this is some good and some bad. Just shows you there's a lot going on in the area of the rider on a white horse, religious persecution. I got one more to go. I put it in here. It's not going to be on the screen. I didn't have another section to put it in. This I just found is really bizarre. It definitely, I think it's something to do with religion, so I'll put it in right here. Researchers inject human DNA into monkeys. Researchers at the Planck Institute of Molecular Cell Biology and Genetics in Germany and the Central Institute for Experimental Animals in Japan injected ARHGAP11B, which is a human-specific gene not normally present in monkeys, into the dark matter of marmoset monkey fetuses. They concluded that the monkeys' brains became more human-like by developing larger, more advanced neocortexes. The study was published in the journal Science. The researchers observed that the modified monkey's brains nearly doubled in size at around 100 days into gestation, 50 days before the normal birth date. I don't know about you, and that's why I didn't know where to put this. To me, this is playing God. This is trying to do God's work, and instead of letting God do His thing, man is doing it. All right. But what about the election? So, some election news and what's going on. I'm sure probably most of you in here you hear bits and pieces. I want to tell you, probably you don't really want to believe anything you hear, no matter where your news source is, and you may not even believe all these. Again, I have documented everything that I've got, but let's just see what's out there. We're going to look at this because Jesus tells us in Matthew 12:25 that He was speaking to the Pharisees and knew their thoughts and said to them, "Every kingdom divided against itself is brought into desolation, and every city or house divided against itself will not stand." So, here, I guess that's right there. Michigan, there's some good news about dates on their voting machines. A Michigan county flipped back to Trump following election software update. An election software in Michigan's Antietam County, that's not right, Antrim County, had an incorrectly directed Democrat votes to presidential candidate Joe Biden was updated Friday, putting thousands of votes correctly into President Trump's total. And so basically, there were, I think it was where Biden led originally by 3,000 votes. Now it reversed those, and Trump now leads by 2,500 votes. And there are 47 counties in Michigan that use the same software as this one, and so that is now being scrutinized. A judge issues emergency order to stop the resets of voting machines here in Georgia. If you haven't noticed, but Georgia's kind of become the hotbed around the country, maybe even around the world. And you've got not only things being said through Twitter or wherever, but you now have the Republican Party is now fighting with itself. It's now probably going to affect the next vote when they have the runoff for the 2 Senate seats. There's a big mess going on right here. There has been an attempt to update voting machines in Georgia, causing the deletion of any records from the 2020 election. This is right before the machines are to be impounded. I'm not sure why they would try to reset when things are still being scrutinized, but maybe there's something to hide. Maybe it's a cover-up. Here we see Georgia is calling for a deeper forensic audit into the Dominion voting machines after an incident with a county employee. A Georgia congressman sounds the alarm on very suspicious behavior by Fulton County employees. Representative Barry Loudermilk represents Georgia's 11th congressional district, including all of Bartow and Cherokee counties and a portion of Cobb and Fulton. And his concern comes after he learned of an incident in Fulton County. Over in Arizona lawmakers call for a resolution to hold back their electoral college votes. At a public hearing in Arizona with select members of the state legislature and members of President Donald Trump's legal team, lawmakers called for their colleagues to support an upcoming resolution that would delay the release of the state's electoral college votes. Up in Pennsylvania, lawmakers formally introduced a resolution to dispute 2020 election results. In fact, I've been able to watch some of the stuff's going on in Pennsylvania legislature. There's some weird stuff going on up there. But this resolution calls for the Secretary of the Commonwealth to withdraw the premature certification of the presidential election and delay certifying other races, and declares the 2020 election to be in dispute, and urges the U.S. Congress to declare the selection of presidential electors in this Commonwealth to be in dispute. Pennsylvania Judge Patricia McCullough rules the election is likely unconstitutional, and this gives Pennsylvania state legislatures power to choose electors. Most of the stuff that I found is not in your mainstream media. You're not going to see this on CNN, probably not on Fox. But again, I can give you all the websites that these news articles are found, saying that the president is probably going to be determined by our Supreme Court, which, if it comes down to that, the Constitution says that each state will then, the Senate will then, I think it's the Senate, maybe House of Representatives, Senate will then vote, and they have to vote party line. And so what we've been told for the last month now may be completely upended, because the Senate will change the vote. So there's still a whole lot of news out there.
Each state gets a vote.
Yeah.
And there's 37 Republicans.
That's it. That's it.
So,
Yeah. The FBI requests fraud and disenfranchisement evidence. The The evidence was collected by the Voter Integrity Project, known as VIP, led by Matt Brainerd, a former data and strategy director for President Trump's 2016 electoral campaign. The FBI has proactively and directly requested from Matt Brainerd the findings that indicates illegal ballots. So now the FBI is involved. Now you may have seen this on mainstream news. CNN delivers what they consider to be somber presidential election updates to viewers that the outcome would be to re-elect Donald Trump. So even CNN is now saying that there is a path to victory for Donald Trump when we're being told that Joe Biden's he's the president-elect. Well, even CNN's saying that may not be the case. All right, so here we are living in a divided nation, and not just here in the United States. Nations are being divided all over the world, and I wish I could give you everything that I found on this, but Israel is divided. Iran is being divided right now. It looks like some of your Asian countries are at turmoil. So a divided nation, as Jesus tells us, it cannot stand. Like looking at in Revelation, we look at the 10 kingdoms. It's found in Daniel 7, Revelation 13. As for the 10 horns out of this kingdom, 10 kings will arise, and another will arise after them, and he will be different from the previous ones. So we now look at the 10 kingdoms that are talked about in the end time prophecy. And this is kind of looking at a one world government. You may have heard that term used. Maybe another term you might have heard is the New World Order. And we're going to look at a third term here in just a moment. But first of all, the Pope wants to have a new world order and have a new political and economic system. I'm going to quote Pope Francis here. He says, God asks us to dare to create something new. We cannot return to the false securities of the political and economic systems we had before the crisis. We need economies that give to all access to the fruits of creation, to the basic needs of life, to land, lodging, and labor. The Roman pontiff said, we need a politics that can integrate and dialogue with the poor, the excluded, and the vulnerable, that gives people a say in the decisions and affects their lives. We need to slow down, take stock, and design better ways of living together on this earth. This is a direct quote from Pope Francis. So basically what he's saying is we need to take from the rich and not give it to the poor, but give it to a one world government so that everybody has equal share. And you won't have it, it'll just be basically on loan to you. That's kind of what he's going at, because that leads us to the next thing, and that is the Great Reset. This is the third term that's being used now. It's a replacement for the New World Order. This is what people are now thinking that we need to do to basically live in a communist world government where no one owns anything. You don't own it. The government owns it. You just happen to live there. And the video I watched on this basically said, you own nothing, but you're happy. And I don't think that will happen here. We wouldn't be happy. We pride ourselves in the American dream. And socialism just, it will not work. But anyway, on November the 20th, that was just about a week and a half ago, the staff at World Net Daily reported that former U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry and European Commissioner President Ursula von der Leyen said a Biden win will propel the Great Reset, which is fundamentally changing America, the end of capitalism, cash, private property, democracy, freedom of religion and speech, the beginning of new rules to live by, the global ethic, digital money that will eventually allow the tracking of all buying and selling, restrictions on the size of houses and vehicles, limits the eating of meat, higher fuel prices, and much more. And so now they're having these meetings. Former Secretary of State, former Senator, former presidential candidate John Kerry is involved with saying what Biden is wanting to help push forward. Because Biden does plan to get rid of Donald Trump's America First policies that he put in place, where he won't, we know the campaign. Donald Trump said, let's make America great again. Let's keep America great. Well, Biden wants to go back to Obama's policy of America is wrong. We have wronged other countries. Let's humble ourselves and elevate them. Well, as Christians, we humble ourselves, but as a people, as a nation, we need to become as powerful as we can so that we can help others. But that's beside the point. That's me standing on my soapbox and preaching to the choir, I know. All right, let's talk about Israel and over in the Middle East. And in that day I will make Jerusalem a burdensome stone for all people. All that burden themselves with it shall be cut in pieces, though all the people of the earth be gathered together against it. So, there's a lot going on over in Israel. There's some dangerous cyber attacks. This came from Israel365news.com. Israel is constantly under threats, not only for terror attacks, but also of cyber attacks via computers of hostile forces. Researchers at the Ben Gurion University of the Negev in Beersheba have discovered an end-to-end cyber biological attack in which unwitting biologists may be tricked into generating dangerous toxins in their labs. I guess, if I understand it somewhat correctly, I guess the cyber attack will fool the biologists to do stuff they shouldn't be doing. So they would now be sending out, instead of you getting a flu vaccine, you're now getting something that's dangerous. If I understand that article to be correct. So, there is also growth and prosperity taking place in Israel. On November the 17th, it was reported that Israel and the European Union are discussing the possibility of building a railroad to link the Mediterranean Sea with the Gulf states. That'd be like Saudi Arabia and some of the other Arab countries. If they agree, it will possibly be called the Regional Peace Railway. Can you imagine that? Peace in the Middle East? Peace between Israel and Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and all these other countries. And it will probably strengthen the economies of Israel, Jordan, and the PA, Saudi Arabia, and the Gulf states. Saudi Arabia is now given permission for Israel to have flights over their airspace. They're getting along right now. Benjamin Netanyahu asked Benny Gantz not to split their country. Right now, they're wanting to split their government and basically have a civil war without the physical contact or fight. So there is, going back to Matthew that we read earlier about the divided nation, Israel could potentially be in upheaval.
What are they fighting over?
Benjamin Netanyahu won his re-election, it was last year, I believe it was, or maybe earlier this year, and it's been disputed. Well, Benny Gantz thinks that he's the rightful heir to it, and they vehemently disagree on politics. One's conservative, one's liberal, and so Benny Gantz thinks that he is rightful to be the prime minister of Israel, and he's willing to take it by splitting the nation in two. I don't know if y'all keep up with American politics. I can't even pronounce her name, but it's the representative. Is it Minnesota where she serves? He's Minnesota. Rashid Tlaib, is how you say her name? She's one of our own representatives in Washington. It's Michigan, I'm sorry, not Minnesota. She's in Michigan, and she promoted a tweet on her Twitter account on Sunday that contained a phrase that is associated with the calling for elimination of Israel, which we've already known that she hates Israel, but to eradicate them, to eliminate them? Jared Kushner is currently, I think he's already there. He is leading a delegation to Saudi Arabia to have some more peace conversations between Israel and the Middle Eastern countries. They've made incredible headway. And that's one of the reasons why Donald Trump is up for a Nobel Peace Prize, because he's done something that no other president has ever done, and that's to bring peace to the Middle East. Yeah, with 3 separate Arab countries. And so now Jared Kushner is over there right now.
And Pompeo.
Yeah, it's Pompeo, yeah. To bring more peace to the Middle East. Which, all that sounds great, doesn't it? But it also means that, hey, this is not only is it huge in the realm of peace talks, it's also huge in, this is ushering in some end time prophecy events.
Somewhere about when you hear of peace,
Yeah.
well,
Well, that's what the Antichrist is going to do. He's going to bring complete, total peace.
Right.
And the promise of peace, but it's all a lie, because it will be temporary until he brings war and destruction. But it looks like, hey, we're having peace in the Middle East. We're going to bring peace between Israel and all these Arab nations that have been in constant war. And so if we continue on this trend, it's very likely that the Antichrist could be around the corner. I don't know if you've seen this in the news, but there was a nuclear scientist in Iran who was assassinated. They used remote control weapons to kill him. And he was a key nuclear program chief. And then just today, another assassination of a military leader took place in Iran. And that was done by a drone.
And they think it's Israel?
They don't know. Right now, they don't know. One was, I'm not sure if this related to this or not. All my news stories kind of run together. But there was one attack that they found weaponry that had Israeli markings on it. But they haven't said that this one was that. Let's see. There is suffering in Iran, really unlike anywhere else. They've been hit harder by COVID than probably anywhere else in the world, and they're experiencing great suffering. There are some more outspoken voices over in Saudi Arabia who are saying that the Temple Mount in Jerusalem is not the 3rd most holy site for the Arabs and Muslims. That's the reason why Jerusalem and the Jews can't build the Jewish temple at the Temple Mount, because the Muslims have a temple there and they consider it to be the 3rd most holy site. Well, I think it was about 2 weeks ago, maybe a week ago, some people came out and said, over in Saudi Arabia, said that's not true. Muhammad never went to Jerusalem. That's not correct. Well, now more sources are coming out and saying the same thing, that the Temple Mount is not a Muslim holy site. I want to stop this for a moment here, because I don't have any notes on this. I'm just going off of recollection and memory. There's a whole lot of conspiracy theories out there. I mean, I've read that the Temple Mount, where the Muslim temple is not the holy site where the King David's or Solomon's temple was. I've read where the Jews are building tunnels under the Temple Mount so that it would cause the temple to collapse, so they can then come in on top and rebuild. I don't know if any of that is true, but I do see this in the news. So let's say, just for instance, and we're doing some hypothetical here, but let's say that the Muslims get to the point where they say, okay, well, that's not our holy site. We'll still use it because we've been using it for so long now, but okay, that's not Muhammad's 3rd most holy site. And if these tunnels are true, or if a natural disaster, or if an earthquake or whatever were to come in and then destroy the temple that's there now, the Muslims say, well, it wasn't really holy in the first place, we'll just let it go. Now the Jews can take over. And so this is kind of big news, that the Muslims are now saying that Jerusalem and the Temple Mount is not their third most holy site. Iran threatens retaliation after the U.S. deployed aircraft carrier to the Persian Gulf. Well, we know there's always been saber rattling there, wars and rumors of wars. Even in the midst of incredible peace talks, there's always going to be something going on. So just keep your eye on the Middle East. All right, the rider on the black horse. Now, this is known as famine there in the Bible, but it could also be associated with hyperinflation and economic collapse. When we read about Revelation 6, verses 5 and 6, when he opened the third seal, I heard the third living creature say, "Come and see." So I looked, and behold, a black horse, and he who sat on it had a pair of scales in his hand. And I heard a voice in the midst of the four living creatures, a quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, and do not harm the oil and the wine. All right, on November the 22nd, it was reported that John Williams of shadowstats.com, which is he does shadow government statistics, said that the COVID vaccines are not enough to turn the economy around. And he said that the economy has been damaged so much that no matter who wins our election after the courts get involved and then the Senate gets involved, the budget deficits will continue, a stimulus package will be needed, and they will eventually cause hyperinflation and a Great Depression. Does that scare you a little bit? It does me. However, I'm still looking at the end times.
However, you look at key indicators of the economy and you don't believe everything you hear.
Oh, yeah.
The stock market, construction. I saw a thing on TV today. Our Home Depot is starting a boot camp so they can create more construction workers because there's such a shortage of them.
Yeah.
We don't have enough guys.
I know.
10 years ago, there wasn't any construction to be found.
Good.
So, I mean, there's the economy. You go down 124 anytime, especially now, it's bumper to bumper. People spending money.
I know.
They were doing that in 208 and everything.
Yeah.
But
that would be my I guess playing devil's advocate is that we are experiencing a big boom, which could also create a big bust.
It can. It certainly can. But I think, and I can't remember who it was that said this. There's 2 people in this nation. Those who will work and those who won't work.
That's right.
Now they're talking about another stimulus, $920 billion, so everybody can get,
Yeah.
so everybody can sit home and do nothing and get paid by the government.
Yeah. And where's that money coming from?
You and me, brother.
Or
China.
China, yeah.
They print it.
Well, that goes right with hyperinflation. So just keep your eye on, the boom that's out there, and the higher we rise, the farther we're going to fall.
Having that scales and the balance and the wheat and the barley and all that, I remember listening to people who would say, "Raise going to go to $2 to $3 a loaf." It's there now.
Yeah. All right. Supply chains are stressed, saying that they can't keep products on the shelves and stores. Now, we've been dealing with that since back in March. And then we got to the point where they were caught up. Now, there are some products that are not caught up all over again. And so I think some people are doing panic buying, thinking about what is still yet to come.
Still showing the toilet paper and paper towels and
Yep.
stuff.
Yep, I know. All right, let's keep on going because I don't want to keep y'all here all night. There's the rider on the pale horse. This would be death and disease and pestilence. Seen in Revelation 6, verses 7 and 8. When he opened the 4th seal, I heard the voice of the 4th living creature saying, "Come and see." So I looked, and behold, a pale horse. And the name of him who sat on it was Death, and Hades followed with him. And power was given to them over a fourth of the earth, to kill with sword, with hunger, with death, and by the beast of the earth. Well, some projections are saying that there will be 500,000 fewer births in the year 2021 because of fear over COVID. People are not wanting to have children, and so the population rate could decrease, not because more people are dying, which they are. Well, it depends on where you get your numbers from on that too, but because fewer people are wanting to have bigger families. There has been observing failing grades in schools because of COVID. New research on student grades conducted in one of the United States' largest school districts shows that the number of students getting F marks has increased by 83% this year due to COVID-19 related restrictions on in-person learning, with students with disabilities bearing the brunt. As a parent of a child in school, I could see that so well. I mean, especially for those doing digital learning, some are thriving in that. I think a lot of others are not doing well at all.
But also they're telling teachers they have to pass them whether they're failing or not.
Yeah.
So they're not really learning anything.
Yeah, I know they did that back at the end of last year, and I guess some schools are probably still doing that very thing this year as well. Over in Australia, in Queensland, they're having a total lockdown, and some are saying that this could be a beta test for a Democratic presidential nominee, especially if the Senate then turns Democratic, and House of Representatives, that those who hold closer to a lockdown response to the COVID-19, what was happening over in Australia could be a beta test. Over in North Korea, they have locked down their capital, and they're actually have executed some of their people because they have not followed the COVID-19 protocols they put in place. So, I mean, because of a virus, which would fall in line with the rider on a pale horse with disease and pestilence, people aren't just dying because they have COVID. They're dying because of COVID, because the government is shooting them. I think it's Japan. More teenagers are dying in Japan than ever before because of suicide, because of depression followed with COVID-19. So it's not just the disease itself, it's all the effects of it as well. All right, we've got a couple more subjects and then we'll be done. Catastrophic natural events such as earthquakes. The Bible talks about the sun turning black, the moon turns red, mountains and islands disappear. These would be our natural disasters. We read about this in Revelation 6:12-14. I looked when he opened the sixth seal, and behold, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became like blood, and the stars of heaven fell to the earth, as a fig tree drops its late figs when it is shaken by a mighty wind. Then the sky receded as a scroll when it is rolled up, and every mountain and island was moved out of its place. Over in Texas, they're experiencing a drought. Over in Russia, they experienced a 6.4 earthquake, and at the exact same time, on the other side of the globe, over at the Chile-Argentina border, there was a 6.0 earthquake. And not only were they 6+ earthquakes, but the depth of these earthquakes is what gathered so much attention about how deep. See, they were one was 362 miles deep. The other one was 364 miles deep.
That's on down there.
Yeah. Can you imagine getting that deep? You think you can dig that far? Jason Pepper's in here to answer that question for us. This year's hurricane season smashes all kinds of records. If you've been watching the Weather Channel, you already know that. They ran out of names. So what do? They started going through the Greek alphabet. what are they on now? Zeta? Because Zeta doesn't stand for Z like it does in ours. I don't even know what number they're on now. There are a record 30 named storms over the Atlantic Basin, which that affected some of the countries. We're going to talk about Honduras here in just a second. There's a major volcano that happened on November the 29th, where thousands of people were evacuated. There were massive floods that claimed 3 lives in Sardinia, and at the same time, which that's in Italy, a rare tornado hit another place in Italy. So while they're experiencing a flood, a tornado then comes in and kills more. At least 3 people lost their lives, while 2 others remain missing after severe storms hit this island. And then the hurricanes we talked about just a moment ago, they leave people in Honduras homeless and destitute. Honduras was hit by 2 hurricanes just in the month of November alone. 4 hurricanes went through Honduras and Guatemala, just to its north, in less than, I guess, 2 weeks time period. And then a state of panic in Tanzania when soil, dirt, just somehow randomly liquefies or turns to mud. There's no explanation for this. Let me read this article to you. I'll read the headline. Soil under Dar es Salaam, the finance capital of Tanzania, is mysteriously liquefying under homes and businesses. Mud has been seen coming out of the soil, destroying at least 9 houses, which means that they have now totally collapsed, cracking tens of others and prompting mass evacuations. Residents start taking the situation seriously when a child and a cow almost drowned in one of these mud pools. There's no explanation for it. All right, the mark of the beast. But in Revelation 13:16 through 18, it says, he causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads, and that no one may buy or sell except the one who has the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him who understands calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. His number is 666. Y'all know QR codes. We use them here to access our bulletin and church information. Well, the president of China, he is, as of November the 22nd, in a video conference call for the G20 nations. He is suggesting that the nations should agree to use QR codes that can scan and track people to track who has had COVID. So, if the president of China had his way, anybody who had COVID-19 would now have this QR code. They said it could be actually put on your thumbnail, and you have your thumbnail scanned everywhere you would go. So if that's the case, then they can actually track you and know exactly where you are, who you've been around, and all that sort of thing. All right, last one, and this is one that I get most excited about or passionate about, because I probably have done more study on this, and that is the Revelation 12 stars. I got a sermon that I preached years ago about some star alignment that took place a few years ago, and some more interesting things are taking place in the sky above. And the reason why it's worth noting is because there are numerous scriptures where God tells us to look to the stars, look to the heavens, see what God is saying to us through the stars. I mean, it is throughout the scripture, Old Testament, New Testament, where we are to see. And here in Revelation 12, verses 1 and 2, now a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a garland of 12 stars. Then being with child, she cried out in labor and in pain to give birth. One Wednesday night maybe, or maybe on a Sunday, I might preach this message on these verses about what God's up to with the stars. But In the meantime, while just looking at recent current events, a fireball as bright as the moon flashes across the night sky over Japan, and social media went crazy over it. Just the videos and people talking about this bright, intense light that was spotted falling from the sky over Japan. Now, here's one that y'all might want to take note of, and you might be able to see it yourself, because this month, Jupiter and Saturn will be at their closest alignment, closest by 0.1 degree off, where they will both be visible to the naked eye. You won't even need your telescope, and you'll be able to see them on, I think it's December the 21st, I believe that's the correct date. It's a rare event in the heavens. Just ahead of Christmas will feature an alignment of planets that a famous astronomer believes was the phenomenon. Now, this is his belief. I don't necessarily believe it myself, but this is what this astronomer believed was the same phenomenon that is mentioned in the Bible when Jesus Christ was born. He says that these two same planets align in 7 BC, around the time that Christ was born. The alignment of Jupiter and Saturn will appear in the skies on December 21st, the winter solstice. The last time the rare alignment of the planets was this close was in 1623, nearly 400 years ago. The rare sight will be visible to those in the northern hemisphere shortly after sunset in the southwestern sky. The conjunction will dip under the horizon after a few hours. So, put it down on your calendars. This will be something worth noticing, being outside, looking at this alignment, that it could be something spectacular to behold. And think about it. The last time it happened was 400 years ago. It's possible that this happened at the time of Christ. It is possible that this is what the Magi, the wise men, saw to prompt them to go to Israel to find the Messiah. There's a whole big thing about all this. I would love to do a study on the fact that Daniel the prophet was there in Babylon. He was put into a position of being a leader in the community. It's possible that he was now the educator in the university system, and it's very possible that Daniel taught the Magi, we know them as the wise men, how to be astronomers, to look to the sky, to look to the stars, to read it just as God's Word tells us to. And it's possible that they were looking and saw this reaction right here, saw this and said, hey, this is what Daniel taught. This is what we have been studying. We need to go to Israel. We need to go and follow the star. But there's others, and probably myself included, who believe that the star for Jesus was a supernatural event, not this, and that the Magi actually followed a star that led them to the town of Bethlehem. Now, I'm very willing to admit that I'm wrong, that it was not necessarily a supernatural event, but it was something that God had orchestrated, and when the stars aligned, it was what Daniel had taught, and that's what the Magi saw to prompt them to go. So, I think that theory that Daniel set it up in the school systems there that prompted the Magi to go is that Daniel told them what to look for, and that the stars were signs, and that when you see this, it meant that the Messiah was born in Israel, and they didn't need to necessarily follow the star. That was just their signal to go to Israel. And where would you go if you go to a new country? You go to the capital. You go and see the king. And that's what the wise men did. The king's men said, well, they need to go to Bethlehem. That's what the Scripture says. And so there's a whole big thing about that. All I know is that on December the 21st, you might possibly see the same spectacular scene that the wise men saw that led them to go visit Jesus. It's possible. And then finally, this is our last thing, that the biggest sunspot in years, producing multiple B and C class solar flares. Although solar activity remains at low levels, active region 2786, which will be the biggest sunspot in years, has produced multiple C and B class flares since November the 25th. Coronal mass ejections were also observed, but none was Earth directed. While we are still experiencing solar minimum effects, solar activity is ramping up as we head deeper into the solar cycle 25. Now, I don't know what all that means. All I know is there's stuff going on. And so be aware of just the fact that there are current events that lead us to the fact that Christ could be around the corner. Now, that's been going on since the birth of Christ. We just talked about the star that the Magi followed to go and find the Christ. God's been doing this stuff since before Christ was ever born. The stuff is still going on. All it means is that we just need to be ready. Okay? This is not a scare tactic. This is not something to say, ooh, no. This is just for you to say, my God is in charge. And He's doing things to get all of our attention. So I hope He's got yours. He's got mine.